My guest this week is Tom Maplethorpe, Associate Director of the Lead Engine, and we're talking about Google Ads. Welcome to the Mortgage Broker Broadcast with me, Craig Skelton. Join me every week while I'll be developing your knowledge to help you build a successful mortgage broker business. Mortgage brokers looking to go self-employed do worry about a lot of things, but generally top of the list is lead generation and where am I going to get my clients from. And one way to get clients is through Google Ads. So this week's episode, I invited Tom Maplethorpe onto the podcast, who is Associate Director at the Lead Engine. He specializes in SEO, CRO, and importantly as well, pay-per-click, which is all around the Google Ads. And really just wanted to get into detail with him, getting back to basics and to understand what is Google Ads, why they're so important, and really looking at how it will help drive clients and help drive leads into your business. So welcome to the podcast, Tom. How are you?
Hi, Craig. Yeah, very well, thank you. All good, all good.
Good.
How are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yeah, very good. Thank you very much. And really appreciate you being coming onto the podcast and talking about your expert area, which we'll get onto and things like that. So yeah, but I appreciate you sort of sharing your time and your experience in the world of Google Ads, which is what we're going to talk about. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you very much.
That's right. My pleasure. Anytime.
Good. So first of all, as always, do you want to just do a brief introduction about yourself and what you do and where you're at and things like that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the an associate director at the Lead Engine. We're sort of based in Peterborough. Basically, what we do, we work with mortgage and financial services firms, and basically try and find them a way of getting in terms of like a consistent, sustainable flow of leads through their website, and sort of like make more of their online presence with a view to kind of like the commerciality of it, sort of driving leads, if you know what I mean. We do things like the branding and things like that, but it's more of a case of it's more numbers based, if you know what I mean. What leads you're getting out of the website? What's the quality of the leads like? How do they convert? And as part of that, as you mentioned, we run Google Ads in terms of driving leads sort of quickly. Some of the other things we do, things like SEO and social media, they sort of tend to take a bit longer to bear fruit, shall we say? And that's why we like the Google Ads, because Google Ads gives us that opportunity to potentially start driving some leads, pretty quickly. I've worked in sort of financial services marketing all my sort of career, over a few different kind of verticals, a lot of mortgages, a lot of car finance, a bit of insurance, but it's always been sort of financial services based. So it's good to have me on. Thank you. Oh, sorry, no, good of you to have me on, should I say? Thank you very much.
No, thank you. And you've sort of admitted there about you are a podcast expert, so you are on, we can give it a bit of a plug right here right now, so you are already on a podcast with yourself and Alex Curtis, which is the Adwords Express. That's now what it's called. It's had a few changes, I think, in names, but that's now what it's called.
Yeah, that's right. No, it has a few kind of brand switches. Yeah, now it's the Adwords Express podcast. I think it used to be the Lead Generation for Financial Services podcast, which now you say it, you sort of realize why it got changed. I think when we started, I think Alex sort of who manages it and runs it, I think he sort of wants to proper, do what it says on the tin kind of thing. But then we've sort of, Advisors Assemble is more like a slightly different brand that we've sort of kind of cultivated, sort of maybe over the kind of like the past year. And it's really more designed to kind of help maybe smaller brokers in terms of make the most of their kind of like their web presence. Obviously, we're a marketing agency. We work with sort of like a number of kind of bigger clients. But this is sort of the idea around Advisors Assemble is to help some of the smaller clients that we sort of, we maybe don't have the kind of like settable capacity to help from a budgetary point of view. So it helps them make the most of their website, their online advertising. So so they can grow themselves.
I think that's a really good point that you make in terms of, because I speak to quite a few brokers that are looking to sort of set up and go from employed to self-employed, and that's the whole point of this podcast really, is about that sort of thing of helping people go into self-employed, and then once they are set up, helping them build the business. And I think, like you said, that the Advisors Assemble, I subscribe every single week to the podcast, and there's a lot of things that I take from it and a lot of things that I learn from it. So if you are new into broking, or even if you are an experienced broker, then I definitely do suggest you check out the Advisors Assemble, as it's now called, as Tom, because there's some real real great experiences, because you are the experts. You are the experts, not only in Google Ad, like we're going to talk about today, and pay-per-click and things like that, but SEO and marketing and everything else as well thrown into the mix. So there's, what I like about it, Tommy, the podcast is it's very diverse in terms of every angle of the business, and you get guests on there that are sort of experienced brokers, and also people as well that have sort of just set up and starting out, and obviously yourself and Alex, who are the experts in this field, so sharing hints and tips. And you're right, there is like a niche there for the smaller sole traders, one-man bands or two-man bands, shall we say, that are setting out, and some sort of great hints and tips on there that you share that everybody can learn from, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the goal, really, to help sort of the smaller brokers grow into being bigger brokers is the idea.
Excellent. So, as I said, the idea of the podcast was really, I speak to quite a few brokers who are looking to go employed into self-employed, and obviously there's a lot of things to worry about, brand, business, everything else. But the one thing that sort of sticks out for a lot of them is generating leads and generating clients is like usually the top of the list. So, and obviously one way that you can generate leads and generate clients is through Google Ads. So the idea of the podcast is really to help sort of get back to basics, really, and talk about Google Ads, what is pay-per-click, like sort of, and those sort of things. Like I say, you do cover a lot of the things that you do with SEO and other things, but really with this podcast, it's to look at Google Ads, and things like you said on there was there is other ways and various other platforms to get ads out, like your Facebook, your Insta, YouTube, various other sort of platforms out there. But really today, I just wanted to talk about Google, because I think it's a sort of bit of a misunderstood one. I don't know about you in terms of the people that you speak to and the podcast that you do, Tom, but I just feel it's sort of a bit of a lack of understanding, really, because it does seem a bit, when you look at Google Ads for the first time and you've got all this jargon thrown into the mix of keywords, AdWords Express, all these different things, PPC, I'm like what, SEO and all this, thinking, oh my God, like where do we start? And brokers being brokers, they take the path of least resistance. So then, because they don't understand it, they don't take the time to learn it. Or it's one of those things of, oh, I'm going to do that someday. I'm going to do that someday. Where it's something that I believe in, and you know that I believe in, and obviously you believe in it because of what you do. So it's just really to help those people out thinking, well, what is the process? Where do I start? What does come first? So it's all right. So that's really sort of the idea of the podcast, to help those people, really.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely.
Fantastic. So just first of all, do you want to give a bit of a background exactly and explain what is Google Ads?
Yeah, sure. So what Google Ads, the way Google works is that when you search for something on a search engine, as we say, Google, it obviously, whatever that is, in terms of, obviously we all often use it, we search it all the time for everything. But basically when you search something, Google pulls the most relevant results up that it thinks that you're looking for. It's very, very clever. It's worth an awful lot of money. They've been doing it for an awfully long time. But what you can do, you can pay to be at the top of that list, essentially. So if we take mortgage brokers as an example, if you were to type in mortgage broker for where you are, there would be sort of like a load of sort of, it's a bit of a weird one. So like a map would show up with some local mortgage brokers. What would also show up is the kind of like what would call the organic search results. That's where people don't pay for the clicks. That's where Google has decided who should be at the top of that. But above all that, the first thing you see is maybe 3 or 4 ads. And basically people pay to put themselves at the top of that list. The way it works is that you pay on a cost per click basis as PPC, pay per click. Okay. And so every time somebody clicks on your ad, you pay Google however much money. The cost of that is determined. It's almost like an auction. It's almost like a bidding auction. And basically, so as this sort of like different providers, there'll be different people trying to get to the top of the page for the same search results. So if you took a local area, say you took Peterborough, for example, where we're not far from where we're based, you would maybe have a number of different providers trying to get to the top of that list. One of the ways, it's not the only way, but one of the ways that you get to the top, as in the very top, is that you increase your bid, or what you're happy to pay for a click. So, for example, I may put a bid in of maybe £2 per click, and I may get some clicks, in terms of depending on where I am. But if 3 or 4 other providers have got their bid at £2.50 a click, there's a high chance that they'll be above me. And that's where I think, okay, I maybe need to put my bid at £2.80 a click. And then that's where, as new people sort of join, the cost of traffic goes up. Obviously, it gets to a point where it sort of stops becoming commercial, in the sense that you start to think, okay, I'm paying however much for my clicks. An important part of what we'll sort of talk in a second, I assume, is in terms of, okay, part of the job is, all right, so you've got to turn those clicks into inquiries. And then that gives you almost like an idea of what your cost per inquiry is. But each sort of, value in terms of, each sort of like click and each kind of search term has its own sort of value. So you don't tend to see click costs kind of spiraling out of control, because it'll get to a bit of a pinch point for everybody, all the people in the auction trying to bid on it, where you start to think, actually, no, that's too much money. Even if I get, a good conversion rate from people clicking to turn into a lead, the cost of it's too high. So that's when it starts to sort of plateau out. But what we do see is that the cost of the traffic differs depending on almost the value to the brokers or the providers. So things like remortgaging. Remortgage is obviously very popular for obvious reasons with brokers. It's faster business. They tend to be better cases and everything else like that. But the cost of bidding on keywords around remortgaging tends to be higher, like significantly higher, than maybe somebody looking for a mortgage broker, because they may be a first-time buyer. They may have bad credit. You don't necessarily know specifically what you're going to get. So that's how basically the pay-per-click advertising works. You choose the keywords that you want to be at the top for, which requires a reasonable amount of research. And then you sort of put your bid in. I'm happy to pay whatever for the click to be at the top. And then, so they click on the ad. It then needs to go somewhere. So it then needs to go to a website. And that's where you sort of think, okay, well, that's sort of half the battle is getting the clicks because you've got to do that in the ads. But then a huge part of it is what happens when they hit the website. So that's basically how pay-per-click advertising works. You're paying to be the top of Google for search terms that you want to be at the top for.
Right. Okay. And that gives me good clarity on that now, Tom. So I do understand what exactly Google ads are. I think there's two things we sort of, from what you sort of said there, that I want to look and move into, because I think it's sort of, then when you talk about click, and you allude a little bit in terms of there what that means and where does that go, and also the keywords as well. So we'll come back to the keywords if that's all right, and just look at so I see the ad, I click on the ad, that then goes through to my website. So whoever's placing the ad, it goes through to their website. So there's no guarantee, like you said, at that stage to then get a lead or an inquiry or anything like that. It's just literally just feeding traffic. You're paying to feed traffic into your website.
Absolutely, that's right. In terms of you're paying Google at the point of the click. So whatever happens on the website, that's up to you to make it as efficient as possible in turning those clicks into leads. In terms of, and that's where kind of like the value of having a good, well-optimized website comes in. When I say well-optimized, I mean things like good content. The content needs to match the keywords that you're sort of searching for. In terms of a basic example being, say, if you are trying to get more remortgage stuff through Google Ads, you would want to click through to your homepage, because it's not really what someone searched for. It's your homepage is probably going to be too general. You want to have a good remortgage page that sort of explains remortgaging, why you're great at remortgaging, and everything else like that. So the content needs to be right. It also needs to have a bit of an element. We call this, not to get too jargony, but CRO is something called conversion rate optimization. And that's where basically it looks at your page layout in terms of where kind of your call to actions are, your web form is, your phone number is, and things like that. Those tiny little things that you sort of switch around that make a big difference about whether a click turns into a lead or not. So that's where, in terms of, so Google Ads is one thing, that's half the battle, but the other half is making sure the website's properly set up to make sure it sort of turns that traffic into leads. Is critical. So you could have the biggest budget in the world for pay-per-click advertising, but it's not going to a website that's set up to turn them into leads, then there's not really much point.
Okay. And I think that's, so for me, understanding the process, which I'll go into a second, because the question I got on there in terms of landing page and what you talked about. So going back to it, you want to make sure that the landing page is right. So wherever they click, you can then determine where that click goes on your website. So like you say, if you've got a remortgage page and you've got a remortgage ad, you want the landing page to be all about remortgages, then don't you? You don't want it to be just going very general to your homepage. So that makes clear in terms of sort of the landing page and stuff like that. So in terms of process, which we will go through, so in your opinion, I'm thinking here that before I even look at Google Ads and before I even start to look at PPC and things like that, the website needs to be right, and the pages on the website need to be right, and the content needs to be right first of all. Because if I'm doing the Google ads and I can be spending all that money, and the website is non-relevant, not set up even live, or the content, the landing pages are shocking, then it's just pointless. You're just spending money and you're not going to get any business from it, really.
That's right. It's important to make sure you do that kind of the groundwork before the ads. The destination is very important. When I say destination, I mean the website. Because yeah, absolutely. Because what we sort of have sometimes with our agency side business, what we sometimes have sort of companies or brokers come to us and sort of say, oh, can we run Google ads to our current website whilst you're building our new one? I mean, probably about 2 years ago, we used to say yes and sort of say, yeah, see what happens and go for it from there. And lo and behold, it didn't convert particularly well, as we didn't really expect it to. But we sort of said, okay, we'll see how it goes. The problem that then has is that then the broker or the provider then has a bit of a negative feeling about Google ads.
Yeah.
So we've stopped doing that, because what we do, we'd put the new website live and say, yeah, great, new website's live. Let's run some Google ads. And they say, oh, yeah, it didn't really work before, did it? So, well, no, but we did say that, and then so we've just now we just have like a flat ban and say we don't run Google ads until the new website's live, because from our end we can't be accountable for the performance if it's not on the website that we've built. So yeah, that's why actually, and as part of our process, we always make sure that in terms of the website set up properly, because as I say, you can have the biggest budgets in the world, but if it's not going to a website that's going to turn them into leads, it's just going to be very inefficient, and there's not a whole lot of point.
I think I'm smiling because I can hear those brokers now like that. I hear Google's a waste of money. We never got anything from it. It was just pointless. We spent loads of cash and never got any. And that's the thing, like, because they've not followed the right process, which is understandable because they're keen to get leads and things like that. But like you say, that can throw. And then you're the brunt of it. You're the host. You're the people that are running the ad campaigns, and you will get the brunt of it from those brokers saying, "Oh, it's just a waste of time. It doesn't work. We're never going to do it again," kind of thing. We spent all this money and we've got nothing from it. So I can hear them now. I can hear them in my ears. So those particular brokers that don't have the patience, and I think it was something I was going to sort of come on to, but we can talk about now, because I think the one thing that I find with all this is that brokers don't seem to have patience with brand ads, anything like that. They just want sort of, and I get why, because especially when you're starting out for the first time and you're sort of going self-employed, you set up a new brand, you set up a new firm, or you're running your own Google ads. If you're part of a firm and you want to run your own ad campaign, you want the quick wins. And I think, like you say, Google can give you those quick wins, but then if you've not got the website behind you to back that up, so do you find that Google ads does take time to build up in terms of content and hits and leads and quality business coming through?
Yeah, that's right. So in terms of, so there's that element of obviously getting your website and your content right as almost like the groundwork before it goes. But then even at the point of putting your campaigns live, one thing, I mean, we've run so many we obviously do run so many Google campaigns over so many different brands. And it is amazing how different ones perform different, or how similar campaigns can perform so differently in different areas over different brands. For example, we ran a group of campaigns in the East Midlands around Nottingham, Leicester, and Derby, all about sort of like 30 miles away from each other. And the performance on different keywords, even though the proximity was similar, the cost per click sort of changed a little bit because of competition and things like that. But it's amazing how in one area, mortgage broker near me converted really well, but didn't convert at all well on one of the other locations. And it's just, that's the thing. Whilst from our end, we know we have an awful lot of experience in it, and we know what's likely to work well. Even at the point of sort of going live, there's never that absolute guarantee that this is going to work as well for this brand. And that's why there's always this period of refining it, making sure it works, and keeping a really close eye on it, especially in the early days. Because of this side of it from our end, where we look at, okay, is the landing page right? Is there anything we need to change on the landing page? Is there a reason that the traffic isn't converting as well on the page? Everything else looks fine. Then on the ad side of it, you sort of look at it and think, okay, why aren't we showing up for this keyword enough as we should do? We need to make changes to that. Do we need to up our bid? Do we need to improve our ad or something to improve the clicks we get through? So there's always that element of sort of making it sort of work better. And what Google has, it's this element of sort of machine learning. So basically what that means is once you start getting some leads through, Google Ads knows, and it starts putting your ads in front of people who it thinks is more likely to turn into a lead. So that's why you sort of see over time it should have steady improvement, because Google's always learning on your ad account, and it's always sort of seeing, okay, so actually I can see, and when I say in terms of who, okay, may mean demographically, possibly, but also it's like their online behavior. So it could find that, all right, someone makes three mortgage related searches before they search for a mortgage advisor and then turn into a lead. So then Google sort of starts to know that. They start to know what people's online behavior is and starts to put your ads in front of people who it thinks might be more likely to turn into a lead. So it's quite interesting from that point of view. So there is that element of it takes a bit of time, manual time from our end in terms of looking and thinking, okay, this keyword's working really well. We're going to put more resource into that. This one's working less well. We're going to get that away. Then there's also like a behind the scenes thing in Google that's sort of saying, okay, these people, this demographic of people convert really well at 6 p.m. on a mobile. We're going to push the ads out more then because we think we'll get more back from it. So there is that element of sort of, time's an interesting thing with Google ads, because time is one thing, but then budget's another. When you sort of think you could run an ad campaign for, I don't know, £10, say hypothetically, £10 a day for 10 days, or you could run it for £20 a day for 5 days, and you get the same amount of data through, if you know what I mean. So it's in part time, because you need time to sort of be able to look at it, but then it's a lot of it with Google is pushing the data through it, in terms of is what it needs to learn from. So it's always a bit of a funny one when people sort of say, how long does it take? That sort of depends on the budget as well, if you know what I mean. And it's difficult. There's no set answer, and it differs between them. When we have some, more often than not, we have to make changes when a new campaign goes live in the early days for one reason or another. We have the odd one that sort of goes and flies out the traps right from the off, which is great, and then don't have to touch it. But then what you also have is over time, sometimes the performance can dip a little bit, and you sort of think, okay, well, why is that? And it can be down to things like there's external factors, like I don't know, like a global pandemic, or in terms of things like the time we're recording now, like summer holidays. We see a bit of drop in performance through the summer holidays. People are busy, they're doing other things. Even though they're searching for the stuff, they may be less likely to commit to an appointment or an inquiry because they're just, I don't know, they think, oh, I'm going on holiday next week. So they just don't bother. And you tend to find a slight dip in performance over the holidays, which is sort of the same with a lot of things. But yeah, I think
that's sorry, mate. I can sort of see that, because I can see that we're still getting the hits on the website and the clicks through and the spend still there and things like that. But the leads, the actual inquiries have sort of dropped a little bit because it's August. But we expect that, I think, because mortgage brokers who have been in the industry for quite some time understand the good months and the bad months. And then, so do you sort of think spend less during, say, August, or just keep your spend as it is, because if you're saying you're still getting the clicks but not the inquiries, I'm guessing you would just keep the spend as it is to then getting your face out there. So when they are ready to buy and they do want an inquiry and they're looking to generate an inquiry, you're more likely to be the front of the list then, I'm guessing.
That's right. There is an absolute element to that. It depends on your budget, really. Some may want to reduce it. What we find in the summer holidays, the click costs may start to come down a little bit, because remember, it's an auction. So other people if other people do choose to pause their ads, that may mean that your click costs become a bit less. So there is the opportunity for cheaper traffic. But yeah, and also say someone clicks on your website, goes away, and then maybe searches for a mortgage broker again in 2 or 3 weeks' time. There's potentially a higher chance that you might show up, because Google knows that they've already been to your website, and it knows based on their online behavior and things like that, it's possible that you might show up on their next search. So even though you may have to pay for that click twice, which is a bit of a pain, but on the second click, they may be more likely to turn into a lead. But yeah, it's just one of the things. And the other thing that, in terms of, I mentioned the competition dropping out, the other thing that can sort of change the performance as time goes on is new people coming in. I say there are about 3 or 4 spaces at the top of the Google ads. So if you have a period of consistency and you're at the top, that's fine. But 2 or 3 new providers come in and start bidding, silly high bids on their AdWords, they're going to go to the top, and you're going to find that your visibility and your clicks start to sort of drop a little bit, and you've got to react to that. Do you choose to get into the bid with them higher up, or do you look to say, no, I'm going to take this budget, I'm going to spend it on something else, different keywords or whatever. So there's those kind of factors that you don't really have the control over, but you've still got to be aware of and got to be able to react to.
I think that's it. When you look at one thing that I wrote down there is sort of being continuously adaptable, and I think that's what I wrote that down before you sort of talked about it there, because I think that's what you're saying is you've got to be. It's not going to be oh, I'm now fixed my Google Ads, my campaign's running fine, I don't need to look at it again and worry about it again. You're going to have to be continuously adaptable to it as, like I said, the market changes, the competition changes, and things like that. And I think that's clear to see from what you're saying in terms of and that can be a shame sometimes, because I think people will think, oh, it's running, I don't have to worry about it, I don't have to touch it again, particularly if they're doing it themselves, which we'll come on to. But I think you've got to be continuously looking at these sorts of things to change with how things are moving in the world of Google Ads, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It needs and that's where it needs kind of like a constant sort of eye on. And that's, I know we'll talk about in terms of running your own Google Ads in a sec, but that's where it kind of needs that knowledge to know, really, if it's not working well, why isn't it? And that's the thing that's a bit difficult to sort of define. You've got all this raft of numbers in front of you, and it's kind of understanding what each metric means and what everything, and in terms of spotting the things of, okay, here's my problem. Is your problem, for example, you're not bidding enough? And in terms, because if you're not bidding enough on a keyword, say it's like remortgages, you may still get traffic through. But as we sort of like touched upon before, Google knows in terms of which clicks are maybe more likely to turn into leads. And so you may get what I'd maybe call lower quality traffic at a lower cost. You still may see a fair few clicks through, but Google may be giving you the lower quality traffic, and it may be giving the better quality traffic to people that are bidding far higher, if you know what I mean. So you still may see some of those clicks through, but there may be ones that are less likely to turn into a lead than someone else that Google knows is maybe more likely to make an inquiry.
Right, okay. So in terms of one thing we haven't talked about, and just to explain a little bit, and we'll go on to, like you said, about doing it yourself or working with somebody like yourself and the benefits of that. But in terms of what is keywords, what does keywords mean, or AdWords that I've heard before, what exactly is that?
So keywords are basically the searches that people make. And there's a few different ways you can set up your keywords in Google Ads. So basically, you may want to think about in terms of, okay, so what searches do I want to show up for? So in terms of, you could look at something local. So in terms of what you could say is that I want to show up for everything within, say, 20 miles of Peterborough, people searching for mortgage broker in Peterborough, mortgage advisor in Peterborough, or even just searching for a mortgage broker or mortgage advisor. I like that as a term when I think about it, because people are actually looking sort of to speak to me. Or, you know, they're looking, when you sort of get advisor or broker in there, it tends to mean they're looking to have a conversation with somebody, as opposed to if you were to bid on something like first time buyer as a keyword, or first time buyer mortgage. It could be that people are sort of maybe a bit early in the journey. Maybe they're looking at, how do I get a first time buyer mortgage? What sort of deposit do I need? You know, really sort of early on in the point of their kind of that house buying journey. They're maybe not ready to turn into a lead. So you sort of think, well, do I want to be paying for that click? Even though they may find the information on the website really, really good. But if they're a year away from making an inquiry, I mean, it could be that they come back within that time. If they like what they read on the website, that's sort of valid. And to be fair, it's also reflected in the cost of a click. A cost of a click for something like first time buyer mortgage is probably a third of the cost of somebody looking for a mortgage broker. And that's because it's less likely to turn into business. So you could sort of look at it and sort of think, okay, I'm going to do the first time buyer mortgage keyword. I'm only going to pay maybe £1 a click. It may not convert as well as some of the other campaigns, but that's okay because I'm not paying as much. Then you start to think about your cost per lead and the quality of the lead that comes through. So there's lots of sort of factors in on that. One of the things that we do a lot of work on is the quality, is trying to work out the quality of the lead. Because in terms of, as obviously as you know, brokers don't get paid on leads coming in; they get paid on business written. So in terms of, that's why we're more interested in the quality of the lead and the cost of acquiring a customer or a client, rather than necessarily getting cheap leads. And that's how we tend to sort of try and build our campaigns, to get good quality through, even if they're not the cheapest leads going, because we're trying to get the lowest cost per acquisition is our model.
Right. Okay. And that, like, I understand, like, sort of where you come from that point of view, but I think from an advisor point of view, when we talked a little bit before, is do you tend to find people do for themselves first of all? So when they're first setting out as a self-employed broker, mortgage advisor, or part of a firm, or a firm setting up, do you tend to see people that do it themselves, think, right, I'm gonna have a crack at this myself, I'm gonna have a look at how I can set my own Google ads up and dip my toe in the water and not look for an expert yet? Because one thing that I find, and luckily enough, like, we work with the Lead Engine and yourself and Alex and the amazing team you've got as a business, and I was lucky to work with you guys, but there's a lot of people out there. There's so many people out there that claim to do this very well. So I think brokers can be sometimes, because they don't know who to turn to, and think, right, okay, I'll just, and there's no trust there from the start. They'll think, right, I'll do it myself. I'll learn myself and do it myself, rather than actually have somebody that may be like, I'm going to be paying all this money out. I'm going to invest in these people. I've got to have the trust with them. And maybe they're let down by that at an early stage and don't work with the right people and the right firms, don't get together and look at Google Ads and the campaigns that are run by the right people. So yeah, do you find people that come to you after they've run their own campaigns, and can I do it myself? Is it something that I can physically do if I'm a self-employed sole trader or I run my own firm?
Yeah, so we get a few people. So in terms of people that have sort of come to us, they've either sort of had an experience or used an agency before, but it's not been quite right for whatever reason, or they've maybe tried to dip their toe in it themselves and it's not really quite worked, again, for sort of whatever reason. What I would say with Google Ads, I'd say you can do it yourself, but almost similar to your website, there's a big upfront investment in learning it, if you know what I mean, in terms of, and Google has good resources for it as well, in terms of teaching you what the different things are. The difficulty is sometimes with teaching in online resources, it's not specific to financial services. For example, a lot of the stuff, so I say Google's training and stuff's really, really good, but a lot of kind of like the scenarios and examples it uses is kind of like e-commerce based. So, some of the stuff it talks about is like things like shopping ads, and in terms of making sure your empty cart strategy and things like that, in terms of people that don't go through and purchase, which obviously isn't quite relevant for obviously mortgage brokers, because it's a very, very different journey and the searches are very different. So in terms of it, absolutely, a broker can do it themselves. But the other thing I would sort of suggest is, so to make sure you have that upfront investment of time and learning, as well as making sure your website's right. But also, so Google has something called Adwords Express, or it used to be called Adwords Express. They may just call it Smart Campaigns now. And basically, that was almost like a very kind of like Google Ads Lite sort of version. You just put some basic information in. You didn't really have that much control over various things, and you would put a bit of budget behind it. And it was basically set up for people who don't know how to use Google Ads, who are like kind of like their own business owners, just want to try and get to the top of Google for some stuff and sort of see how it goes. But I always have a bit of a bugbear about it, mostly because I've never come across one that's worked. Is sort of my issue about it. And I think I may have said with Alex on maybe another podcast, is that with the Adwords Express, or what maybe used to be known as, it's kind of, is it sort of fit for purpose then? Or is it fit for mortgage brokers? Is it maybe for kind of maybe small businesses on a high street looking to drive people into the shop? Or do you know what I mean? It's kind of, sort of set up for this one size fits all, which I don't think is quite right. So what I would suggest, if someone is looking at doing themselves, have that upfront investment on understanding how Google Ads works, understanding what the metrics are. Because if you sort of go down this route of sort of, okay, I'm going to go down the proper AdWords, I'm going to put something together, you sort of start putting some budget into it and it's not working. And if you don't know why, it's very frustrating, because you sort of, and the numbers will be there. There's somewhere there'll be a number that tells you why it's not working. But if you haven't sort of put the time in to sort of understand which number it is and why, whether it's, is your search showing up enough? Is your bid too low? Is your landing page not set up right? There's a thing called quality score. Is your quality score low? And if so, why is that? It's all those things that kind of you need to spend a bit of time reading on before you sort of go down that route. I would recommend trying to learn to do it through the proper AdWords, because it's one of those, if you just sort of dip your toe in with the Adwords Express, or dip your toe in main AdWords without really understanding it, then I don't think the chances of it working well are probably quite slim. And as you say, the examples you've heard speaking to other brokers, they have sort of a bit of a underwhelming experience with it. But it's probably because one of those factors. It's not something you can just sort of like rush headfirst into. There's a lot of groundwork to be done beforehand.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and like I say, it goes full circle, because it goes back to the brokers again going, it's not worked, it's never worked for me, I don't get any leads, I'm spending all this money and not seeing any return on my investment, which is a big thing. So in terms of when we look at spending and work, like we understand and I get working with somebody like yourself or a specialist that runs campaigns, yes, it's more expensive, but at least your money you are investing is going in the right place. I think that's the big thing for you. You're not wasting money, kind of thing. You are investing it in the right place with the right keywords, and having somebody manage that for you in this ever changing and adapting Google sort of place. So I think that's sort of the important bit to understand is that working with somebody like yourself, you're more likely to, yes, it's going to cost more, absolutely, but with everything in life, the better the quality and the better return you want on it, it's gonna cost you more money. So we talked about that before. So I think that's the sort of the thing with it that people sometimes don't understand, is that you do need to put a decent amount aside from a marketing point of view and a brand point of view and a Google ad point of view to then make this work. I think that's something you've got to put aside and just forget about that money, really, in terms of thinking about, that's my budget, that's what I need to stick to, and that's my marketing budget, or what my Google ad spend, or whatever the case may be. And that's where we're at with it. And you're right, you've got to look at, it is down to budget. And that was going to be my next question, really, in terms of spending. I guess it's a real difficult question to answer, because people's budgets on marketing and budgeting spend are different based on size of firm, understanding of the firm, and really their opinion on marketing as well, because there's a lot of brokers I know that don't spend anything on marketing whatsoever. And there's a lot of brokers I know that spend a lot of money on marketing. So is there a sort of, and I know it's really difficult to answer this, Tom, but is there like an ideal kind of spend, or is there like a pinch point of sort of spending, or does it get to a certain point where it's not worth investing anymore? Or
yeah, it is really difficult to sort of say what's right, in terms of, because you've got to factor in, okay, the cost of your website, the cost of a few other different things. In terms of a spend going into AdWords at the minute, I want to say at the minute, it's because things like click costs change, and in terms of search volumes go up and down. As an example, like March was sort of incredible because everyone wanted to get their mortgage done and try and through before the stamp duty holiday ended. So we'd say the search volumes were really high. The intent to turn into a lead was really high. So the cost per leads were as low as we've seen for a while. What I would almost, the number we sort of tend to have in mind is, to put into AdWords, you probably need sort of as a minimum £500 to £600 a month. As a sort of minimum, but then it sort of depends on kind of the business you want as well, in terms of, that's kind of maybe sort of would expect that to get a reasonable sort of flow of things through from a people maybe searching for a local broker. But that also then depends on where you are. If you're like for example, if you're in London, or maybe a bit further south, the cost per click is higher than it is in the north. So that then factors in. If the cost of traffic is double in London than it is in say Newcastle, then obviously you're going to get half the clicks for your budget, and then the cost of your leads are going to be double what they are elsewhere. So it is a tricky one. We tend to say £600 because you need a certain amount of data to get through to try and make it efficient, if you know what I mean. Because what happens is, say if you just say, I'm only going to throw sort of maybe £400 into it, there could be, you sort of look at it and you sort of think you've had it spread over a couple of campaigns. You sort of look at it and sort of think, okay, some bits have worked, some bits haven't, but you haven't really got enough data to sort of make an absolute firm decision on whether something's right or not. So it is a challenge, but if I were to press to put a number on it, I would say 600. That said, we are working on something at the minute which is a bit more sort of lower cost, because for some we sort of speak to and sort of think 600 is maybe a bit sort of steep for what they want to do. We're looking at something that's a bit lower cost, but in terms of, we need a bit more time on it, just to sort of like work out, see if how sort of sustainable it is. Initial things look good. It's to do with sort of like bidding around things like specifically around things like Google My Business around the local area. Pushes a lot of phone calls, but we are sort of trying to find a different solution for people that are looking to have a bit of a lower budget than that, because that's the thing from an agency side. On our side, it's obviously there's the ad spend is one thing, but then there's the cost of us managing that as well, and we tend to package it up with other things as part of like an SEO strategy and social and other things that sort of go with it, to try and make it a good value package. But at the same time, it does require that additional spend to start driving some leads through early. Particularly if websites or brands are quite new or don't have much authority, is the term we'd use, website authority that is, or brand presence, then sometimes it does need that push through Google Ads to make a bit more out of it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's it. It's just deciding what comes first. Is it sort of, I want more leads, but then I've got to spend to get the leads kind of thing. So it's just, if you've not got that backing or investment behind the business or behind yourself, then it can be a tricky one to get right. You sort of start thinking, well, £600 a month, and then the cost of somebody like yourself to run the campaigns and things like that. Well, is that a little bit too racy? But there is a good return on the investment. So maybe it's a case of, well, we start, like you look at the new stuff that you're looking to do, with maybe bringing clients in at a lower budget and a lower cost kind of thing to start off with, but once you start to get traction and buy into it, then they invest more and then get up to the levels that you need to get the decent data out of that. So
absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And then just lastly, then just to talk about alternatives, we've talked about Google Ads. What's the difference between, in terms of time and cost, in terms of Google Ads, Facebook ads, Insta ads, and all the other sort of platforms you can use?
Yeah, so things like Facebook ads, you could typically run Facebook ads on a much lower budget than you could Google ads. Say, the number I sort of think for Google ads is that kind of £600 mark. You could run Facebook ads for a lot less than that. The way Google ads are set up, and Facebook ads for the way we would set them up, is basically done on a daily budget. So in terms of sort of like Google ads, sometimes we sort of do it at kind of maybe a minimum sort of maybe £30 a day, maybe a bit higher if we don't run it at weekends, because you can condense it and choose your days. With Facebook ads, you could run, depends what you want to do. If you want to drive leads from it, you probably need £20 to £30 a day. But if you're just looking to get content out there, you can do it for a lot cheaper. In terms of, it's more of like an awareness campaign, or in terms of being there front of mind. You can target people. Or certainly, it's a bit of a funny time, because with Facebook, they've at the time of where we are now, they've got a bit of trouble with Apple and the apps, in that people aren't necessarily allowed to track people's online behavior through iPhones anymore. Basically, what it means is, the way you would advertise on Facebook, you could choose people that are interested in a mortgage or a remortgage or whatever it is. But the way Facebook finds that out, whether you're interested in a mortgage or a remortgage, they can't do as effectively anymore. So we're in a bit of an interesting period with Facebook in terms of how sort of effective it is, or will be. But what we find with Facebook generally is that, in terms of, we found you can potentially get cheaper leads through Facebook, but we found that the quality isn't maybe as good as what you get through Google. The main reason for that is when you think almost fundamentally, with Google ads, you've got that person who's looking for something there and then, absolutely in that moment. With Facebook ads, you're sort of appearing as almost like a display ad, for someone that maybe probably has an interest in it, but they're not necessarily looking for it there and then. So yeah, Facebook ads. We like Facebook ads from more of like a consideration point of view, more of like a brand building side of things, pushing content out there. People look, they read the content, and then maybe come back at a later date once they're sort of more ready to kind of turn into a lead, basically. And as part of that, Instagram ads can be run on the same ad platform as Facebook. So if you're setting up Facebook ads, you just tick a box basically, and your things start to run on Instagram as well. So that's our experience with Facebook ads. In terms of, we've always sort of found, okay, so the cost of the leads could be cheaper, but we've also found the quality to be better generally from what we see through Google.
Right. Okay, that clears up. And I'm guessing Insta, we're not going to obviously talk too much detail about it, but like things like Insta, you can run Insta ads as well now, can't you? And I'm guessing they run the same sort of thing, with them being part of Facebook, and the whole platform is part of Facebook. So
yeah, that's right. In terms of it's the only slight difference is obviously kind of like the Insta's very much more kind of like image based. So in terms of there's only really some small technicalities you need to do in terms of changing things like literally your image size, but it can have the same ad content, has the link to sort of to go through. Funny, when we've ran ads through Facebook Ad Manager and included Instagram, Facebook always naturally pushed more of the ads out on Facebook than it did on Instagram. And you can actually see, you can go in the ad platform and see where your leads come from. Do my leads come from Facebook? Do they come from Instagram? And we always found Facebook to be the better bet. So then we got to a point where we just put it through Facebook. We stopped doing it through Instagram for a while. But yeah, you can do it through Instagram. I say there are other platforms as well. There's things like YouTube, I think you mentioned earlier. YouTube's actually run through, in the same way Instagram is run through the Facebook platform, YouTube is run through the Google platform. So you can manage any kind of YouTube ads on there. And also you may see it in terms of when you're around other websites online, you'll see ads popping up. Often that's through something called the Google Display Network. Again, you can go through Google and you can decide where your ads show up that are more sort of like displayed, getting in someone's face, rather than them actually searching for it. We typically find the search ads are the most effective in terms of, because you can't beat that intent of somebody looking for it there and then, even though the cost of it is higher. Right. But that's not to say the others aren't effective in their own way or in different ways, but that's basically our experience of it.
That's how your experience, fine. Okay, and I think that's the thing is sort of wrapped around this is like when we talk about doing it yourself or doing it like through like somebody like yourself, because you are managing so many different accounts and so many different campaigns, your learning sort of continues from a group level as well. So like one thing that you might learn from a particular ad account, you could put into and change another ad account, and obviously you're learning from that from a bigger overall picture rather than doing it myself. So I think that's one of the benefit that we haven't talked about, but that is a massive benefit that I would see, is that your learning is greater because this is what you do day in, day out. And also as well, you're running so many different campaigns, and then whatever you learn on the campaigns, you're then adapting other campaigns around other businesses. So everybody benefits from the size of the campaigns that you run.
That's right. I mean, when I first joined Lead Engine just over 3 years ago, we weren't financial services specialists at the time. My experience was all in financial services before, and when I came. But in terms of we had some financial services clients, but it was a mix of all sorts of stuff. We had sort of like retail, we had things like sort of like boiler companies, we had sort of all sorts of stuff. But what we always sort of found was, in terms of anything we learned from a boiler company, wasn't transmissible to one of the retailers or one of the financial services business or one of the pharmaceutical business or whatever. It never, in terms of, and that's what we found. So we'd learn something, okay, great, with the boiler thing, but there was no value to any of the businesses from that. So that's when we actually sort of made a bit of a conscious effort to say, okay, we know financial services, Alex and I have a lot of experience in it, let's just hone in on that. And you're absolutely right. Everything we sort of learn over the course of the group of accounts that we sort of manage, and they all see the benefit off the back of that. And the good news is with mortgages that there's plenty of search to go around, because that's the other thing people ask in terms of, with you, sort of, is there kind of like a conflict of interest working with so many? And we sort of say, if we were working in a much sort of tighter niche, then that would be a viable concern. But we sort of think of it as, in terms of everything we learn, there's plenty of mortgage search to go around, and that's almost how we judge it. I mean, there are 8 million mortgage searches a month in the UK. So yeah, we're fair way off scratching the surface on that at the minute. Yeah, so exactly. there is the odd instance where we maybe sort of have to, we maybe have, there's some people who have approached us that we've had to say, oh, I'm sorry, we don't quite feel comfortable because we have another client who looks at something very specific, like a very specific type of mortgage. Okay. So they've sort of come to us and say, oh, can you do this? And we sort of have to say, oh, I'm sorry, we wouldn't really feel comfortable because that search volume is so tight. It wouldn't be really ethical or fair for us to work on two brands that are so very closely aligned. The good thing about all other mortgage brokers is that, in terms of there's so much broad search over different sort of locations nationally, everything else like that, it's it's quite comfortable for us to make it work. But there is the odd instance where we sort of have to say, well, I'm sorry, yeah, that's a bit close and a bit tight. We've already got an existing client, and just sort of have to apologise on that one. But yeah, fortunately, the size of the market is big enough for plenty.
Exactly. No, I do very much work on the abundance mentality. I think there is enough. Get it right. There is enough business out there for every single mortgage broker, and a lot more as well out there in the marketplace. So it's there shouldn't really be any conflict of interest in terms of, like I say, apart from obviously the real niche stuff that you do. So fantastic. Tom, I've sort of spent and taken up quite a lot of your time today. Is there anything that we've missed or not talked about quickly on Google Ads, or do you think we've covered quite a lot of ground, and I've learned quite a lot this morning, but is there anything else that you think we've missed or not covered?
No, I don't think so. I think the main thing to take away is just in terms of, before you spend £1 on Google Ads, just make sure you've done the groundwork. Make sure your website is sort of, in terms of set up well. In terms of, when you think about what's well set up, you sort of look at other providers. What do their websites look like? What do other people who run a lot of Google Ads, what is their websites? Because if they run a lot of Google Ads, chances are it's profitable for them and they convert well. And in terms of, build things like that we know that help convert well, things like build up your reviews. It's no kind of coincidence for us. The providers we work with that have the most Google reviews or Trustpilot reviews tend to convert the best from click to lead. It's a huge thing that people look for, that kind of credibility and trust. So yeah, and also in terms of, if you are planning on running those Google Ads, just make sure you do sort of the bedtime reading on it. So you have a pretty good idea. You're not going to become an expert, and that's the thing. We've got sort of been doing it for years and years, and in terms of, you're not sort of going to be able to almost replace the kind of, or in terms of, have a similar sort of level to understanding as what other people may have. But it gives you a good idea of, if something's not working, then you can have a bit of an idea of why. But that's, so it's the preparation from it that I would certainly try and take out of this. So you basically, you give your Google Ads the best chance of success, because we see it all the time. You spend a few £100, it doesn't work, and you think it's rubbish, we're never going back to it again. And we see it all the time, and it is going to happen. Even if in your mind you sort of think, oh, no, it's fine. I appreciate it. It may not work, X, Y, and Z. When the time comes and you spend the money, it's gone. You won't go back to it. So in terms of just make sure you give it the best chance of success, because it is so powerful, and it's a great way to get some great quality leads through, and it's a great way to grow the business.
Definitely. I think the quote about bedtime reading put me off straight away. I've got no desire to have bedtime reading about Google Ads, Google Analytics, and the rest of it. You just need to say that to me, and I know a lot of people will be thinking the same way. No way, that's not bedtime reading for me. So I don't think I'd last very long. I think my eyes would be closed fairly quickly to looking at Google Ads and learning at that time. So definitely. So, Tom, thank you so much for your time. I will in terms of when the podcast, we've released podcast and post it, we will get you tagged in. So if anybody's and obviously the lead engine as well. So if anybody's got any more questions, want to contact you and looking to work with you guys, I'll tag in also the Advisors Assemble. So hopefully direct people through to that as well, because I listen and subscribe, as we've talked about, to that podcast. I learn a lot from that as well, which is great. So, and if anybody does looking to work with experienced sort of digital marketing, Google Ads, SEO, CRO, which I've now learned today, which is what that means.
Yeah,
so I didn't know that this morning. I saw that on your LinkedIn, and I thought, CRO? No, I don't really know what that is, but now, at least I now know that is. So if anybody's looking for PPC, SEO, CRO, then obviously contact you and Lead Engine, and hopefully that will give you a good insight into and a good relationship to help build your Google Ads, as we talk about with the abundance mentality. So, Tom, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, mate.
No, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you very much.